All right, welcome to Ivory GC. Today we're welcomed by Viravyne Chhim, General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at MGG Investment Group, a private credit investment firm managing over $6 billion in assets. She began her career at Latham Watkins, specializing in banking and structured finance before transitioning in-house. Since then, she's held senior legal roles at major investment firms, including GSO Capital Partners, building deep expertise in regulatory compliance and risk management. Now at MGG, she leads a lean but highly effective legal team, supporting 60 professionals while overseeing all aspects of legal and compliance strategy. In this conversation, we'll discuss her transition to becoming an in-house counsel, the challenges of navigating private credit regulation, and her advice for lawyers looking to break into finance. Viravyne, welcome to Ivory GC.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't we start with going over what you're doing now, your current role, the company you're working with, and the industry that you're in.
Sure. So as mentioned, Brian, I am currently GC and CCO at MGG. It's a private credit shop managing approximately 6 billion of assets. Headquartered in New York, we've been around for 10 years. We were seeded by investor Frank McCourt, former owner of the Dodgers, and over the course of the 10 years, we've focused on our investing in senior secured first lien loans to middle market companies in the non-sponsored space. And a few years ago, we started sort of adding another vertical to that, which is more of our structured solutions, more private equity style of investing. And I joined 2 years ago, so November 2022. And in the past 2 years, they've kept me really busy. I like to say we have a small but mighty team, as you described us. I have a department of two, but I lean on multiple functions throughout the firm that are non-legal, non-lawyers to help me sort of achieve my legal and compliance goals at the firm.
Interesting. So can you talk a little bit about the non-legal component and the people that you're working most closely with outside of the legal department?
Sure. So I guess I would break up MGG Investment Group into sort of two houses, if you will. One is the investment side of the house. It's the front-facing, deal originating side of the house, and also the side that's sort of fundraising as well, fundraising with third-party investors. And then there's the non-investment side of the house, literally the backbone infrastructural side of the house, which the investment operations, finance, accounting, legal, compliance, tax, audit. So we sort of help facilitate the operations once a deal originator brings a deal into the house. What happens when we close and fund on that deal, and then take it through the deal life cycle and make sure that it gets appropriately deployed in all of our managed funds. And then, so when I was referring to sort of the non-legal side of the house, that was that second side of the house, the non-investment infrastructural side. Those
Got
are
it.
the functions I lean heavily on to help support me in my legal and compliance function, just because of we both touch everything on the other side of the house, which is the investment front-facing side of the house. We touch everything there together, so we have to sort of together be the backbone of the firm in the sense of facilitating the infrastructure and the
Yeah.
operations.
Got it. Got it. And so on your team, do you have so you said it's a group of two. Is it yourself and one other, or there's two others, and are they attorneys or paralegals, or just a combination of both?
I do, so a team of two, which includes myself, which is an assistant counsel that just joined us in December of last year. I am guided by one of our co-founders. He's the president, and he's also a chief legal officer and a lawyer by training. So I have his sort of guidance and sort of strategic vision as well to help guide me on legal strategy. But really, in terms of day-to-day tactical strategies, it's really me and my assistant counsel. So a team of two in that
Got
sense.
it. Got it. And so what do you handle in-house versus what do you enlist your outside counsel support for? Can you talk a bit about what your team primarily handles on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So I view the role between in-house counsel and outside counsel as it really should ideally be a partnership. So while I might enlist outside counsel to document our fund investment documents, and I might enlist outside counsel to document our investment credit agreements and financing agreements and things of that nature. Literally be the surgical doctors on those documents. I might enlist those two types of outside counsel to help us, but it's a partnership because I'm the one I and my assistant counsel are sitting on the trading floor alongside the business people that are negotiating these terms. And so we are literally the eyes and ears of the business side, and we can then partner with our outside counsel to execute that
Got it.
as we see everything sitting on the
Yeah.
trading floor.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today. Talk a little bit about where you started your career and how it progressed.
Sure. So I started at Latham Watkins as an associate, and Latham has a 2 year sort of rotational program where you can rotate through multiple departments. I rotated through litigation and multiple transaction practices, but ultimately landing in the banking and structured finance practice. And while there, the firm sent me on secondment to Credit Suisse Asset Management. So they literally parachuted me out to a bank, and I had to sort of just live there, show up every day, 9 to 5, and figure out what I was supposed to do to help the client. Credit Suisse was and still is one of Latham's biggest clients, and so we were all ambassadors of the firm. We had sort of a class of secondees from all the law firms in New York, and we were sort of the ambassadors of our respective firms. And I didn't know what compliance was at that time. That was like, I think 2008 global financial crisis. And we were parachuted in to help fix the instruments that were in distress at the time. My seat was in the Credit Suisse Asset Management Credit Investments Group, which had a number of issued CLOs, which were all in distress because those were the instruments that were in distress during the GFC global financial crisis. And so my role was was very similar to my current role, which is to sit on the trading floor, deal up with walk up desk inquiries, and help the business people do what they need to do, whatever that was, any sort of legal documentation, any negotiation, any sort of all hands on deck distress scenarios, literally just anything that comes up. So no day was similar to any other day. And, I kind of fell in love with being in house then and have never looked back since.
Yeah. So if you could, because you're general counsel and chief compliance officer, so if you could break, how do you conceptualize the legal tasks that you handle on a day-to-day basis from the compliance tasks? What are, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of overlap, but how would you
Mhm.
generally distinguish the two?
So I guess, as I mentioned, when I was seconded to Credit Suisse, I didn't know what compliance was, and at a huge bank like Credit Suisse, legal is definitely bifurcated from compliance. So as I mentioned, I fell in love with being in house, and so when I returned to Latham from the secondment, this opportunity opened up at GSO to go in house, but to be dual hatted as both a lawyer and a compliance officer. So that was sort of my first exposure to being dual hatted. And as you said, there's a lot of overlap between the two functions and the two departments, but it really does help to wear both hats. I'm a better compliance officer because I'm actually working as an in-house lawyer to the business. I'm a better in-house lawyer to the business because I know the rules of the road that the firm needs to be following as a compliance officer. So uh, it sort of just bleeds together. So I guess because of the two buckets of obligations that I have as a GC and CCO, um, every day is sort of compartmentalized into these are my legal tasks and these are my compliance tasks, but I'm able to be a better consigliere or advisor to each side of my hats because of the other hat, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And so would you say compliance has more to do with how the firm complies with regulations, and the legal side is almost more interpreting what that might be, and compliance is how you take that and put it into action? What are your thoughts along those lines?
I guess I would say the legal side is more the transactional nature of of the hat
Okay.
or of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's transactional in the sense of deploying our capital into underlying operating companies, and so investing and the transaction documents that are derived from that, or also as we're fundraising, we kind of view that as a transaction that we need to close on, and so bringing in multiple third party investors, closing on those investors, and so treating it from as a transaction from that perspective. And then the compliance side of the house is, or the hat is rather, how am I complying with the rules and of the road that apply to us?
Yeah, got it. That makes
Yeah.
sense. So what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when moving from a large law firm to an in-house role at a financial institution?
I guess the funniest sort of, I guess, the funniest difference is that at a law firm, you are a profit center. So you're literally walking
Yeah.
on water. You can do anything, you can demand anything, you have a whole suite of assistant secretarial staff that supports you. You can literally ask for anything, any kind of home office setup you could dream of, you can ask for. Then coming in house, you're literally a cost center. When I was seconded to Credit Suisse, I literally had to like apply to have like a desk and a chair on the trading floor. I had to fill out an application and go through like multiple levels of approval, and it was like begging for permission to just sit next to the business so I could help advise them.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing here. I'm in house now at a firm full time, but I try to be judicious about my spend. I can't go crazy. I have to be thoughtful about which outside service providers I'm engaging, because these are not sort of deal expenses or fund expenses. These are, we call them manco expensive management company expenses. So I have to
Yeah.
be really thoughtful about the spend as a cost
What
center.
what strategies have you developed and implemented over time to really to maintain that spend, control your costs as as the leader of the legal function?
Well, I try to use my transactional animal skills in terms of negotiating with our service providers for volume discounts or alternate fee arrangements across the board, just to try to reduce our firm spend, not just at the manco level, as I call it, management company level, but also at the fund level, the deal level.
Yeah.
If we can get the same quality of service for less, why not ask for it?
Yeah.
It's kind of something I learned at Blackstone. What we have at Blackstone, we had an outside counsel policy that was sort of mandated from the top, Mr. Schwartzman down to us, that we would apply sort of, or demand rather, a fee discount across all of our service providers that were law firms. And I sort of apply that principle now in my day to day.
Yeah.
It's just something that makes business sense.
So have you been able to accomplish any interesting or unconventional fee arrangements, either with outside counsel or other partners that have been particularly effective?
Yes, I have actually. So I've, been able to successfully apply sort of, the Blackstone, Mr. Schwartzman outside counsel policy here at MGG. And we're also, when there's like, interesting fact patterns, like a litigation matter in a particularly distressed name, for example, where we don't want to spend 5 million just to get 5 million of remedy back in the litigation matter. That's a fact pattern where I might reach out to outside counsel, our litigator, our star litigator, and say, hey, well, what are your thoughts about an alternate fee arrangement? And they've been very receptive. I think it's because the fact that we're asking for that kind of a fee arrangement means that I'm really testing their love of the merits of the case. And so they're happy to take that back and take it to their executive committee to understand, to consider, just because the fact that they're willing to accept a contingency arrangement or some other alternate fee arrangement means that they really believe in the case and they really
Yeah.
believe that they can succeed on the merits.
Yeah. So you've worked across multiple financial firms, like you said, from Blackstone Credit to MGG Investment Group. What key experiences or decisions helped shape your expertise in banking, structured finance, and investment management?
I guess I would say being at a huge place like Blackstone, I was there 2 times, 2 stints there. The exposure, just the level of exposure to the different asset classes, which is unparalleled. Blackstone manages assets across real estate, credit, insurance, private equity, hedge fund solutions. And so just the ability to touch all of those different aspects of an alternative investment firm was amazing. And not to mention the super talented individuals across all of these departments that I was able to be exposed to. That was just I can't find that anywhere other
Yeah.
than the big shops. And then but then the positives of going in-house to a smaller firm like MGG or some of my other smaller firms, Matlin Patterson, FPA, Varagon, is that you do get to touch everything. Being at a big house, if you're in the legal and compliance department, you can become a little bit siloed, and they have big teams of like 30 or more, and so naturally being one of 30 means you're going to be siloed to like one or two different product types maybe. But then going in house, there really isn't the ability to be siloed. As I mentioned, we're small but mighty, so you have to touch everything. You sit
Yeah.
right on the trading floor. You're going to have to deal with people coming up to you, asking you questions and interrupting you. Might be in the middle of an agreement and deep in thought and try to mark something up, and someone will just come up and ask you something completely different, which will have force you to switch code a little bit and just switch
Yeah.
your thought process. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
When you're handling, the various matters that come up as you become much more of a generalist, what do you find yourself really enjoying? What type of work or roles that you are playing within MGG do you really like?
I do like, well, there's two things that I would say I love the most. I really love working on transactions. And that just kind of goes back to my origins as a financing lawyer at Latham. And so I love, helping collaborate with other parties internally and externally with our service providers, our law firms, to put together a deal that works for everyone. I love that, negotiating aspects of a deal that makes
Yeah.
sense for everyone. I also love speaking with our investors, like being at a small firm like MGG. Um, folks in the functions like our function, in-house legal and compliance, we get to speak with investors more often than another place like a Blackstone because we're lean. So we're multi-hatted. We have to have the ability to speak with investors. They want to know that the infrastructure of MGG is sound and that all of the functions across the non-investment side of the house are best in class, just as the investment side of the house is best in class. And so
Yeah.
just speaking with investors is great fun. We see them in our office in person. We host them at our offices here at One Penn Plaza, which is on the 53rd floor in the Madison Square Garden area. Beautiful views of Manhattan, and so it's great fun to host our investors in our office or kind of offsite events and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, and that's a little bit of an unusual role for a general counsel and someone that's in-house in the legal role. So talk about how you've developed a skill set interacting with investors and maybe putting on a different hat and really what you've learned from that, the growth of that skill set that you've
Yeah.
developed.
Yeah, I think it just comes from being I guess I was always sort of a servicer. Even going back to my Latham days, I was always servicing a client, and the definition or the concept of who that client is changes from role to role and firm to firm. But you know, as I've been in house for all these years, I've always treated my superiors and my business people as my clients. And
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't that different to sort of start talking to investors and treating them the same.
Yeah.
Back at Blackstone, even though we were quite siloed in that sense, I did get the opportunity to work on co-investment opportunities where we interface directly with investors. So just kind of like migrating that skill set of servicing a client over to servicing an investor, it has kind of
Yeah.
served me well.
Got it. And at MGG, you're part of a legal team supporting a firm with $6 billion in assets under management. What strategies do you use to manage legal and compliance responsibilities efficiently?
So I gotta say, the bad answer is that I do manage some of my responsibilities in Excel, so very manually.
Yeah.
But I also sort of we started to use more tools that are less manual and maybe a little bit more sophisticated, I would say, like such as Monday.com and just kind of which are sort of allows teams to collaborate and see what everyone is working on and assign responsibilities. So I use that in my team not only within the legal team, but cross-functionally with other non-legal teams as well. Um, but I think it's very important to build rapport and relationships with everyone inside the firm, whether they're on the front-facing side or on the non-investment side of the house. And so I have weekly calls set up with the key stakeholders of the firm, whether it's the head of asset management, whether it's the founder himself, or it's the co-heads of the operations business. I have weekly touch points with them so that we can, be really transparent with each other on and keep each other accountable on what we owe each other, and also
Yeah.
just to sort of a forum just to talk about anything else, any other business. And so
Yeah.
um that way I really feel like I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on at MGG, whether it's front facing or whether it's backbone non-investment facing.
Right. Right. You mentioned Monday.com. Have there been other, or can you talk a bit about some of the technology implementations that you've been able to work on at MGG and how how they've been successful?
Sure. So we're actually undergoing a pretty significant technology initiative here at MGG, which relates to sort of more of our trade or investment operations, or the booking of those investments, um, the, the tracking, finance, and audit and monitoring side of that. But I can speak to in support of the legal function. We have onboarded one or more vendors, like a CLM, a technology initiative, to help us with managing our legal obligations under whether it's our credit agreements in
Yeah,
terms of duties that our underlying borrowers owe to us, and then in terms of also monitoring our fund documents and our side letters, so monitoring what we owe to our investors. So
got
um,
it.
have been able to sort of onboard that, and we're in the middle of implementing that tool that will help us sort of aggregate all of these hundreds of documents and get a eye
Yeah.
view and translate them into business ease and not so much legalese. And so you, if you need to some quick answers, you don't need to go through 50 documents. You can just go to the
Yeah.
database essentially and query it. It uses AI in the background.
Yeah, it's interesting. So which CLM vendor did you choose of the array that are available?
We chose Surmise. We went with Surmise. They were attractive to us for a couple of reasons. They have worked with financial institutions before. The founder is also a former lawyer who I think his origin story relates to he had to go through hundreds and hundreds of M&A contract or hundreds and hundreds of contracts in the context of an M&A transaction, and
Yeah.
that's what made him think of this tool. And we've been able to implement it. And what I like about it's a small company, so they're only at the Series B funding stage. But what I like about working with a startup company is that they're very responsive to our needs and our asks and our
Yeah.
feedback. So even just today, we had our relationship manager in our office stopping by. He was just in town, and we were able to give him honest and transparent feedback on. And
Yeah.
he literally 15 minutes later, he said he was going to take it to the CEO and see what he could do to help us. And so, so yeah, Surmise. I'm not sure if they're not as huge as some of the other CLMs out there, but I think the fact that they're in growth mode is actually really helpful and kind of fits with our kind of our personality set as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's one that I hadn't heard about, but I know that there are a lot of options available, and there's also a lot of different ways that you could use the technology. Some from our contract lifecycle management,
Mhm.
from generating the agreement, from automated intake and automated contract generation, all the way through electronic signature, to then handling from the more of a perspective of like a repository. I think like you've
Mhm.
talked more about where OCRs, the contracts, it picks up key attributes. You can
Mhm.
do, searches and it'll do some analytics. With the rise of AI, I mean, it's becoming pretty sophisticated and impressive. What
Yeah.
types of insights you can get from these repositories? So is that what are you primarily using it more for a repository than like a contract lifecycle, start to finish type of a facilitator?
Yeah, yeah. The nature of the agreements that we have, as I mentioned before, we use outside counsel to be our surgeons on documents like our fund documents or our credit agreements. So that because they hold the pen on that, it really doesn't allow for us to use a CLM for sort of pre-signature work.
Yeah,
But we are using right now mostly for post-signature work, like the analytics that you mentioned, like on a post-signature basis, querying the database for things that we need. Give me all the deals that have this term, etc.
interesting.
And also, and what borrowers owe me this certificate by a date certain. But yeah, we
Yeah,
are testing potentially using this tool for on a pre-signature basis for things like redlining NDAs, or having it ingest our playbook for NDAs so that we can more efficiently do that, or generate, you know, red lines to services contracts and things of that nature. So
yeah, yeah.
definitely lots of things on the horizon.
Interesting. So, what skills do you believe are critical for lawyers who want to thrive as in-house counsel, particularly in investment management?
I think the one thing that clicked for me when I went on secondment and then subsequently went in house is that you really have to change or convert yourself from a lawyer, like an academic lawyer, to a business person that just happens to have a
Yeah.
legal training or legal and compliance background. That really is key because I think the stereotype, and I think it's a stereotype because it's true, is that business people are naturally skeptical of lawyers. They view lawyers as the necessary evil at an investment firm or in-house, and just kind of yeah, you have to have a CCO if you're a registered SEC advisor. Kind of that's kind of like the stance or the
Hmm.
posture. So I think you
Hmm.
have to change their mind. I think you have to, be hold their hand, be their consigliere, be their business advisor. You just happen to have a legal training, which is necessary for things like investment transactions or fund closings. You need a lawyer. Particularly, you need an in-house lawyer to partner with your outside counsel because we are the eyes and ears and the boots on the ground at the trading floor. So yeah, I think that's the true light bulb moment for me was when I realized I got to be a business person. I got to think like a business person. I have to
Yeah.
anticipate what this business person needs and wants before they even ask.
Yeah. And so have there been um, major experiences or significant lessons that you've learned that have kind of helped you communicate more with the business team, and kind of transition from more of an outside lawyer that just as folks with both in-house and outside counsel experience just know it's a different skill set. What have
Mm.
been some of the key lessons or key experiences you've had that have helped you transition into more of that business friendly role?
Um, I think, well, I guess a couple things come to mind. I did go through, some significant regulatory SEC exams with while I was in house. And in order to get through something like that, you have to, that can be sort of just to paint the picture for the listeners. It can be a 6 to 12 to 24 month review period where either back when back in the day would be the SEC examiners living at your firm in a conference room for 12 months. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, or and nowadays I think post COVID I think it's a lot more virtual and it's a lot less intrusive. But the funny story that I like to tell is my very first SEC exam was also the time when I was expecting my first child, and that was at Blackstone, and people were taking bets like, oh, who's going to exit first, Viravyne's baby or the SEC? And it turns out my Viravyne's baby exited before the SEC. So like, then an SEC exam can be longer than a human gestation period. So yeah, so I went into labor in the midst of the exam, so I couldn't help my team with anything else. But yeah, so just to paint the picture, so to get through something like that, a 6, 12, 24 month examination when the regulator is in your office, um, asking all sorts of questions, we're talking multiple document requests, going from document request number one all the way through maybe number 59.
Yeah.
You've got to be in partnership with the business because they're the ones that have the answers. They have the facts. They were living the transaction that's being asked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so I guess along those lines, well, that experience in and of itself kind of cemented or solidified in my mind how key it was to have a really good relationship with the business because I can only help my business people if they tell me everything, and
Yeah.
they won't tell me everything if I don't have a relationship with them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of key experience, like an SEC exam, something like that, like just like a really watershed moment, was key to solidifying that concept for being a house and making, I think, making folks like me and successful is just to have that really strong relationship with your business people.
Yeah. And you mentioned now the importance of having a good relationship with the business folks and the challenges that can come up with trying to establish those relationships. And it is so important. I try as outside counsel, it's hard to get people to come to you early because they're thinking about the clock running and the bill going up.
Yes.
That's one of the one of the bigger challenges that we face. But it is so helpful when you, even if it's just when the lawyer is clued in on what the considerations are from a business perspective. Even if nothing legal per se is coming up in the short term, just knowing what's going on with the business in the background so you can be proactively thinking about what might come up from a legal perspective is
Yes.
really, really helpful. What strategies, you mentioned having regular meetings with business folks. What other ways have you accomplished, really forming some strong relationships with your business counterparts?
Well, I think it also helps, I guess, being in house or being in this seat, and being at a firm that's so lean, where you guys actually get to see and touch everything. It
Hmm.
actually helps me to sort of connect the dots. So, what I mean by that, so, I might be sort of working with deal team A on closing an investment transaction, and we might have a co-investor in that investment transaction that's asking us for these terms, and then it might help trigger a thought in me like, wait a second, our investors asking us for this. We should be asking for this when we invest in a deal. So
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
so then I go to the other team, says other deal team B through C, and I say, hey,
yeah,
when we're doing an investment just like deal team A, are we asking for this? Because our investors asking for this, and we
yeah.
should be asking for it when we're investing. So just helping to connect the dots and putting people together, and bridging the gaps is kind of like what's been so helpful.
It's one of the things that I love most about the job is being in a lot of ways a hub of a wheel that sees
Hmm.
a various parts of the business and is able to connect the dots, is in a unique position to really talk to a variety of different functions.
Hmm.
And so the better I've found you're able to see the connections between various parts of the business and able to bring people together so that you're on the same page, you can really have just a positive influence on the direction of the business, not just from not just from a legal perspective, but also that's where
Hmm.
you can add value from the business perspective. So as we
Absolutely.
wrap up here, what advice would you give to a junior lawyer or someone early in their career who aspires to be where you are today?
Um, what advice would I give? One thing that I wish I had known back when I started was really just to lean into your confidence, and really be confident, and just don't hold back. Don't allow self-doubt to cloud your next steps and your judgment. Believe in yourself, have a seat at the table, take up space, be vocal,
Yeah,
appropriately vocal.
yeah,
Don't let someone speak over you, mansplain to you. Just, you know, yeah, be confident in the space that you're due at the table,
yeah,
and if you have a viewpoint, vocalize it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that. I mean, I in my early in my career, you do learn a skill set, a way of communicating as a lawyer, particularly as an
Mhm.
outside counsel lawyer. And I found that it was helpful for me to have a period where I listened more to the business
Mhm.
folks, in particular when I went in house, got a feel for the tone, how the business operated, what conversations were being had. And
Mhm.
then you can find your voice again, really, where you can,
Yes.
speak out and be confident in who you are as a lawyer, that you're well trained.
Mhm.
We have a way of thinking that can often really add value to those business discussions. And then when you're able
Mhm.
to speak up in a way that fits within the culture, there's certainly impact that you can have.
Mhm.
So I really
Mhm.
really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective. It's been a great conversation, and I
Yes.
wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Yes, very much enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Brian.